In Rolling Hills, California, with rolling hills, ranch houses, sweeping views of the ocean and rocky cliffs, a member of the community association caught a woman hanging clothes to dry in her backyard. Clotheslines are banned, she said, by the zoning code for unsightly things, quote, including hanging wet laundry out to dry, unquote. They're a threat to our property values. If we let one do it, God knows what will happen. Clothes blowing all over the place in the wind, soiled clothing with stains that have not been succumbed to spot remover, ladies' lingerie, panties, sheer baby doll pajamas, thongs dancing in midair in full view, inciting the desires of our young boys, who will incite the desires of our young girls. You know what could happen if we allowed clotheslines? Become a haven for illegal immigrants who hang their clothing on lines and rocks in the slums of Los Angeles. They will want to come here to live and dry. It's bad for our economy. What will happen to our dryers, to Sears and Roebuck's, putting people out of work? Poor Mr. Maytag will really have nothing to do. This is why I am a clothesline activist belonging to Project Laundry List, advocating the energy advantages of hanging laundry. Attend meetings at the Ethical Society every month. Bring my wet laundry to hang in protest. Paint designs on old wooden clothespins. Watch home movies from the 50s and 60s, the last great age of clotheslines. Attend parties to raise funds for a clothesline museum. Listen to lectures by ethno-clotheslinologists. March in rallies for awareness, because I champion the human right to dry. Good evening. My name is Charles Carr. That poem, by the way, is called Clothesline Politics. It's from my first book of poems called Paradise, Pennsylvania. So good evening again. My name is Charles Carr, and welcome to Philly Loves Poetry, a collaboration between the Moonstone Arts Center of Philadelphia and PhillyCam. The focus of our program is to give our viewers the experience of the rich and diverse culture of poetry in the city of Philadelphia. So consistent with the format of our program, which has been really focused on different themes, the theme for tonight's program broadcast is the humor of poetry and the poetry of humor. And I can think of no one better in the Philadelphia area and beyond to have as a guest to discuss humor and humor in poetry and read the poetry of humor than Mike Cohen. Mike Cohen hosts Poetry Aloud and Alive at Philadelphia's Big Blue Marble bookstore in Chestnut Hill. Mike's articles on sculpture regularly appear in the Schuylkill Valley Journal, in which he is a contributing editor. His colleague in these endeavors is also his constant companion, cohabitant, cohort, and confidant, Connie, who keeps Mike and his writing from going off kilter. Mike's wry writing has appeared in the Mad Poetry Review, Fox Chase Review, and other journals. Mike's poetic presentations feature humor and drama against a philosophical backdrop. Mike likes to bring poetry and audiences to life in different venues, cafes, libraries, bookstores, including Princeton's Cafe Improv, the Pen and Pencil Club, the Hedgegrove Theater, Fergie's Pub, Harlem's Apollo Theater, and neither least nor last, the Philadelphia Laurel Hill Cemetery. People often ask about a poet's process. Connie is integral to Mike's process. She is his first reader, his primary audience, and she gives him invaluable feedback and insight on the potential reaction to my writer. Connie took an interest in poetry for Mike's benefit. Wow, who does that? She attended the Philadelphia Writers Conference, she says, so she can better help Mike with his poems. She writes sparingly. But when Mike entered one of her poems in a contest at the conference, Connie won first prize in poetry. Her poem was not humorous, but it was poetry. And before I go any further, Mike is the author of a recently published book, Between the Shadow and the Wall, which is published in 2020 by Cornelius Media. So welcome, Mike, and welcome to Connie.
Thank you.
Great. It's so great to finally have you on the program, and I've looked forward to this, and I know it's going to be a lot of fun. You know, Mike, I've heard you read, I will say, perform your poems. Actually, I hosted you when I was the host at the Fergie's Pub many times, and invariably found myself as the host bent over laughing. And I noticed that the audience also was experiencing the same kind of joy and humor. And I can remember specific people or friends of mine, they still talk about that night and you as a poet. So I've heard you read and heard you, perform poems about a wide variety, what I'll say very unusual subjects. I can remember about pigeons, about the pain in your hip, and about the language of cows. But also, I don't want to leave and say, well, Mike is just a poet comedian, because I've read and heard poems of yours that are very exquisite, very lyrical. So you're not like what we call a one-trick pony. You have a wide variety of approaches, but I think most of us really think of that aspect of your poems that has a tremendous amount of humor in it. So how do you approach writing poems with humor? Where does this come from? Is this just part of Mike Cohen's nature, or is this, something deeper than that?
Well, I think it's in the nature of the poems. I think I'm always surprised by what direction a poem is going to go. And I usually think if I'm surprised, that's a good thing. So I follow the surprise where it leads. And a lot of times it does lead to humor. And a lot of times I'll think it's really funny and I'll run it by Connie and she'll tell me that it's not nearly as funny as I thought it was. So, which is another funny thing, but it happens. But it's really good to have that feedback, because you don't really want to present it to an audience or to anybody else really until you know that it has it's accomplishing at least some of what you're trying for it to accomplish.
Yeah. And, we say there are poetry readings, but I've always thought that your readings were more performance. You have a very distinct style in reading your poems, and I heard you actually sing a poem, and it was humor, and it was really great. And so it's not the usual, approach to, and I think that's the greatness and the charm of it, is that there's much more energy that you put into performing these. And where does that come from? I mean, do you have like an acting background or
Not really. I was in one show. I was in Anything Goes with my daughter, community theater, but that was as close as I've gotten. But I soon found, after coming to poetry readings, that it really helps to be a little histrionic about it. And I do love to string my poems together to get them to show how they relate to each other. And sometimes it's not so good. Sometimes one poem runs into another, and Connie will tell me, well, they didn't know when that poem was over, because you're right. you run it over with the beginning of the next poem. And but I don't mind that. I think the audience usually follows along.
Oh yeah. Yeah,
and
when I went,
Okay.
Go ahead. I'm sorry, Mike. Go
As
ahead.
far as the singing is concerned, I noticed that the audience always claps when I'm finished. So if I can get them to applaud that way by sparing them my singing any further, then so be it.
Is there a poet or poets, I'll say that has really influenced this approach, or influenced you in your approach to poetry?
Okay, well, I started doing public poetry in the Philadelphia Poetry Forum at the Northeast Regional Library. And that's where I met Steve Delia. And he was running it with Bob Forster at the time. And I really learned from watching him because you could tell that he really was enjoying what he was doing. Some people get up there and just read their poems and you don't really get any feeling out of it. You have to listen to the words and see what you can get out of the words. And I really thought that that's what you do when you go to a poetry reading when I first started. But then I saw him do this with such joy and such verve. And I thought, well, that's what I want to do. And, I've been pursuing it that way.
The other aspect of you're a poet of the page, but you're also very much a poet of the stage in the sense that I don't ever remember you having, at least when I saw you, a piece of paper or a book in front of you. All of it was from memory. And some of these poems, very long poems, and so one can think as well, it's like spoken word, but it is and it isn't. It's a very unique way you have to present your work. And I mean, how do you do that? I'm always challenged, and more as I age with the memory piece, to be able to come on and do a long performance. I can remember at Fergie's you were on for 22 minutes, and that's a lot.
Thank you. Yes, and I do have to work at that. I mean, it's not like a photographic thing. I don't automatically memorize a poem. I work at it, and you have to keep doing them, or else you lose them. But you'll see me read some poems later. So there are some that I don't memorize.
Mm-hmm.
But I like to memorize it because it frees me up to move around. My father used to say, "Oh, I like to see it jump around up there." And,
yeah.
Yeah. But he can't do that.
I can't do that
virtually. You can't do it. You have to just sit.
I found it's very freeing that way.
Mm-hmm. Oh, I very definitely you're a very physical presence when you read, and unfortunately, in this venue, virtually, we can't see that. But when we go back into the studio, I promise you, I'm going to give you a venue where you can get up and do your Mike Cohen thing.
Thank you.
So all these different topics, I mentioned a few of them. What is your discipline as far as writing? Are you somebody, you hear about certain poets, they get up in the morning, they have their coffee and they read their paper and then they go to their studio or whatever and they begin to write poems. And there are other people that say, no, I'm really more instinctual. It's when a poem comes to me, then it comes to me and then I work on it. So do you have a specific discipline or approach?
If it comes to me, I try to get something down. Either I'll get it down on my phone or I'll get it down on a slip of paper. And because, you can't remember. A lot of great ideas just kind of go out of your head and you don't remember what they were about. But I find that the most productive time for me is in the morning. That's when I'm the sharpest anyway. I do a slow fade through the day. So you're not hitting me at my peak right now, but I'll do my best.
So on a daily basis, do you and Connie confer? You say, well, this is where I am with this piece, and Connie's as your, as your editor in a way, or do you wait till you really feel that, hey, I can bring this to her and I'm gonna read it to her.
Yeah, well, you were
Or
asking
perform.
about this, and I've been thinking a lot about it, and I realized that Connie delivers my poems. Like I
Wait.
I feel like I get to a point where they're ready, and it's time, and like my water has broken, and it's time to call the midwife. And I call Connie and I say, I think I've got something for you. And usually I try to present her with like triplets at least, so that she can pick and choose, and she won't feel too bad about saying, well, this one is like, but, and she'll say, well, this one is my favorite. So I'll know to eliminate the other two.
With humor, I mean, some of the subjects that you have selected, for example, the bovine mantra that I read, and which is very funny, okay? But what is it about the humor in poetry that there's a seriousness about it? And how do we choose that? I mean, I'm kind of paraphrasing something that Billy Collins said in one of his master classes about, well, my humor of poetry is that I really separate myself from reality, and I'm in a different realm. Would you say that that's where you are? When I think of like the cow, and people say, well, it's kind of ridiculous, but it isn't in this world. And in some ways, that's a profound problem between man and nature, is that we don't recognize that they have a language, and we have to understand that language. And that really came through while I laughed. When I stopped and thought about this, is a very serious message here. But how did Mike get to, how did you get to that?
Well, it's an absurd premise, but it does lead you to think, well, maybe the cow's got something there. And I think my general outlook is that we people are not nearly, we may be the top of the food chain, but we're not really maybe the best this planet has to offer. We're certainly not doing it the best favors of all the beings here, and so I start with absurdity in a lot of poems, but I try to layer it. I try to give it some deeper meaning, as you say, and invariably a deeper meaning comes out because there's always profundity beneath the humor. And I don't really mind if I can read it to an audience and they'll laugh and they'll enjoy it as a humorous piece. And if they think about it later and start unlayering it, start peeling that onion, that's a bonus. That's wonderful.
Mm-hmm.
But I do a lot of absurd things. I do a lot. I did the cow. I did a lot of things with mannequins where I'm conversing and communing with mannequins, and kind of gives me some time when she's shopping to do that.
Mm-hmm. But also, the one poem I remember also, the poem you wrote about a pain in your hip, which a lot of us eventually come to, with age or whatever. But I mean, you expanded on that so wonderfully. I mean, you took it to so many different places, and so can you talk about that process? To be, as you say, layering, to build a poem around a pain in my hip.
Well, I think you start with a nugget of an idea, germ, and then you see as it grows, you see if it's going to be a successful poem or not. And then if you can add another surprise and another surprise to it, it's just, and it surprises you as you go through this process. That's the thing. If I'm surprised, I know I'm getting to something. toward the bottom of something.
Sometimes things happen and I say to him, "You're going to write a poem about that." I could tell. But other times I say, "How in the world did you think of that?" I'm like astounded by some of his ideas, and also just like you.
You do have to be open to letting your mind go different places.
Well, Connie, do you feed Mike some of these ideas, or do you say, "Stop, Mike, you're talking about something. Why don't you write a poem about it?"
No, they're just things in our lives. I could tell they're going to lead to a poem, knowing him so well.
And you're always
he's really quite a genius.
And you're always his faithful companion at readings. And it seems that you have as much joy at having probably heard some of these poems a number of times, but they continue to be humorous and they continue to be enjoyable. I think that's really, it's a great test. That in time, I'm sure. My wife, who goes to some of my readings, I mean, the poems are, after a while they get kind of stale. But with the performances that you do, you really renew those poems. And the ones that you have, do you come back in and say, "Well, I want to add something to it now"?
Oh, I do.
I want to add something, because I had a thought. Let's just take the one about the cows, or let's take, about the pain in the hip. Oh, geez, I had something else that I could add to it.
Yes, that's true. And sometimes you take something away too. So.
And take something away. Okay. So I did ask you before. You mentioned about the Northeast Library, but are there other poets that you read a lot, or you follow? Those are favorites. You say, "Well, I read, these poets. They're an inspiration." Or who have you really kind of followed as far as the poets on the page?
I don't know that I really follow. I jump around a lot as far as reading different people, and of course I've read a lot of Billy Collins, and you can see the relationship there. But I get a lot of pleasure out of a lot of them, and the thing is, I find that there are words and phrases that poets use that no one else uses. And these are like thought-provoking words and phrases. And they will lead me somewhere completely different. It won't lead me to do what that poet did with it, but it'll lead me somewhere else. And I know I wouldn't have gotten that idea unless I had read that poem.
Mm-hmm.
So, but we're in a critique group, and the group certainly is a big influence.
So you do go to you're like in a workshop, and you bring your work there? Or?
We meet every Friday. We've been doing it virtually now for a long time too. But we were doing it before then. It's Abby Porter and Steve Delia, Roger Lowenthal, Lisa Karen, and Frank Bird, and Connie and me.
Wonderful.
And, the thing is, it's a diverse group. Like there are different kinds of thinkers, and they give you different kinds of ideas. And a lot of times they're contradictory, but it's really interesting. It really helps. Like of course, I run things through Connie first, so I know they've kind of been. I've eliminated some of the really bad stuff. You never see there's no such thing as a poet's complete works, because if you saw their complete works, you'd be like aghast. If you saw my complete works, so we really try to give the best, offer the best of what we do, and it helps to have someone help you pick that out.
So, as you say in part of your bio statement, that all is a work in progress.
Yeah.
everything is a work in progress. I think that's an interesting, way to look at it, because with poetry, with a poem, let's say, that has been read or shared, not even maybe published, it seems like, well, that's as far as it can go. But I really believe is that poems can be organic, and somebody can say, I want to bring this is like a second version of that poem, and not feel that, hey, well, that's all I had to say at that time about it, but now it's another time. There's other circumstances, or there's other ideas and language that have come in, and I'm going to add that, to, so that a poem isn't static, that it's has some dynamism, and that's very much part of what I hear. That's very much part of how you have approached this.
Yeah. Well, don't you find that you end up revising poems long after you thought they were done?
Yeah, and some poems I go back and I look at and I said, oh boy, I wish I could have. I would really like to add to that, because, I have new language, I have a new perspective on things. So I don't want to ever think that a poem is dead. It's in the book and that's it, or it's in whatever, and that's it goes. I think we all should go back and look at our work and say, there's different things, and there's edits that we can do, make it better, polish it more. So I think this has been a great conversation, but what most people really want to hear is you perform and read your poems. So I'm going to turn the stage over to you, and you share with us your poems, and discuss as you want, about these particular poems.
Thank you very much, Charles. Thank you. Actually, Connie's going to. Connie has something to read that she wrote.
Great.
Explains how we got together over poetry, basically. How this developed, our relationship with poetry and each other.
And it's also the foreword in this book.
Okay.
Until I met Mike, I had little regard for poetry, something I attribute to less than talented high school English teachers. Word by word, line by line, stanza by stanza, our class would doggedly attack each poem, killing any natural appreciation we may have had. It was every bit as stimulating to me as dissecting the fetal pig I was forced to do in biology class, minus the formaldehyde, of course. Henry, my first husband, did not share my disdain for poetry. Once in a while, he would show me poems he admired, hoping to change my indifference. I would listen politely and even enjoyed some of these, but it wasn't until I met Mike that I had a real feeling for poetry. It was 3 years after Henry passed away that Mike and I first met. On our second date, he invited me to a poetry festival and asked me, of all people, me, to select 6 of his poems for him to recite, full-heartedly risking his reputation. I guess he really must have fallen for me. Still, with hesitation, I did my best and chose my favorites. We arrived at Barnes & Noble, were seated, and given programs. Mike was the 4th reader on the schedule. Right away, I could see this was not like high school. As a matter of fact, the poems were so impressive, I worried that those I had selected for Mike might be weak by comparison. Now it was his turn to read. There was applause even before he began as he ran up to the podium. And when he began, the audience sat a little straighter and leaned forward. What a surprise when I heard his voice, rich and deep. so unlike the soft, gentle voice I knew. It was then I realized a poem is more than what is written on the page. I needn't have worried. I had chosen well, and the audience loved Mike. He returned to his seat next to mine and took my hand. As we got to know each other, Mike would often ask me to comment on his poems, adding another layer to our relationship. And believe it or not, I even ended up writing some poems myself. In time, I came to see poetry as far more than words, lines, and stanzas. Poetry is like a camera equipped with multiple lenses, allowing us to see the world in never-ending ways, from narrow slivers to wide angles. Nonetheless, even now, there are poems that confound me. There are poems that make my eyes struggle to stay awake, to stay open, but others fill them with tears. Some cause me to laugh, become angry, snap my fingers, sigh. The best make me catch my breath. And of course, as we were saying, some of the funniest poems are like a doorway to a deeper meaning. And they also make you catch your breath. And now
Great,
Mike,
Connie.
now Mike is going to read.
Okay. It's a great intro.
Thank you.
Thank you. Well, this is one of Connie's favorites that she usually picks. It's called He Recites His Poem as If. He recites his poem as if he wrote it in one burst, as if he had not stopped for a snack, then returned to replace wrong word by wrong word, by near right word, by right word, by just right word. He recites his poem as if he had not left it half finished to make love to you, and forgotten about it and all the rest while he tried on your fingers and slipped into your skin, as if that hadn't changed him forever, once more, as if nothing ever changed, as if nothing that is might not be. He recites his poem as if wisdom and love were effortless and endless, as if all his words were just right words, as if he had not discarded so many just right words and started over, as if he were the lion, never outrun by a gazelle, as if he were the gazelle, never to be outrun by the lion, as if truth were eternal and eternity were true, as if the perfect fit of your fingers and your skin were not an extraordinary thing. He recites his poem as if he were capable of writing it again. And I'm sorry that wasn't funny at all, but
And the thing about we want to mention is because he's gotten a reputation as a humorous poet, sometimes people are disappointed. They're waiting for a punchline or for something funny to come. So in a way, he doesn't like to be known as a humorous poet.
oh, I don't mind that.
And then sometimes when he's reading a serious poem, people start laughing. So it has some advantages and disadvantages.
Well, anyway, I'm very thankful for Connie. Thankful for a lot of things. His song. Thanks for the light and the noise of the lark. Thanks for the silence. Thanks for the dark. Thanks for the power that creates and destroys, and for always giving me more than one choice. Many thanks for my will, whereby I may do what's forbidden, and for those friendly shadows that may keep my secrets hidden. Thanks for those secrets, delicious and deep, even for nightmares that punctuate sleep, for letting me choose not to do as I ought, and for sometimes allowing me not to get caught. Thanks for the wicked as well as the good, for the fact that I don't have to do as I should, Thanks for the demons I often adore. Thanks for not making existence a bore. And for that, perhaps we have to go back to thank Adam and Eve, because they had to break the ice for us. This is called Au Naturel. If you believe in Adam and Eve, just think of how they were first blessed. If they ate the right food, they could go about nude and never would have to get dressed. Adam wasn't equipped with a fly to keep zipped or a cumbersome suit with a vest. Eve hadn't the woes of runs in her hose. Now wasn't that all for the best? They'd be naked this day had they not gone astray and committed original sin. Today, people are shy of the naked eye. Many cover up to the chin. Yet something persists in us that resists and insists we should be as they've been. Some pristine bit remains in our overgrown brains. We are all nudists under the skin. So Adam and Eve started all that, and they started sin, and they started. Wasn't for them, there wouldn't be any sex. And, but they started that with just an apple, and fortunately, we have more appetizing things to eat. This is called sex and chocolate. What we both wanted was sex and chocolate. What you said was, "How about some chocolate?" What I didn't say, but only thought, was, "You got it backwards. Sex first." But what I said was, "Okay, let's have some chocolate." We shared the chocolate. Now, in the sweet afterglow of that confection, you mumble something about sex. But somewhere in the delicious depths of your brown eyes, I see what a tough act chocolate is to follow. Melted. All that I can say is, how about another chocolate? Yes. Speaking of sex, there are a lot of things that you can do with poetry. You have a lot of freedom. One of the freest things you can do is name your poem. The titles don't get copyrighted in and of themselves, so you can call it whatever you want. This is the sexiest poem ever written. The sexiest poem ever written is just what I call it. I can call it whatever I want because it's my poem. It's like grape nuts. There aren't any grapes, no nuts either. Grape nuts is just what they call it. They can call it whatever they want because it's their cereal. Like the store called Honest John's. The proprietor's real name is Ted, and he's no more honest than he is John. But Ted can call it whatever he wants because it's his store, where he gets away with peddling crappy merchandise at too high prices. And he has the gall to call it Honest John's. But at least he doesn't sell grape nuts. And that's the sexiest poem ever written. And while we're about superlatives, this is called Best Day. Ever think about this? Today may just be the best day of the rest of your life. Something may happen, some small, awful thing. So by tomorrow at this time, your world could be a much more miserable place to live and die. This may happen. This will happen to a lot of people. People you don't know, people you don't care a thing about, people like you. By this time tomorrow, many of them, many of you, many of us will be looking back on the best day of the rest of our lives. Ever think about that? Have a nice day. Connie has a poem also about a day in her life. There's something that could have been tragic happened.
There is no humor at all in this.
But this is a poem that won a first prize at the Philadelphia Writers Conference. So.
But it's a very sad poem. So change of pace. It's called Apology. I am on the big bed, mommy on one side, daddy on the other. Love towards each other, love towards me. Love flows to the ceiling, to the walls. You are going to have a baby brother, mommy says. You will be a big sister, daddy says. Happiness bubbles up from deep inside me. After Eric, mommy is busy, daddy is busy. Where is all the love? I play outside with the other children. There is a puppy across the street. Everyone runs across to see it. I follow. Now I am lying on the street behind the car, surrounded by neighbors. In the back seat, headed for the hospital, mommy on one side, daddy on the other. The year before my mother died, shaking her head softly, she said, if not for the baby, I would have watched you more closely. All those years she must have blamed herself. I never knew.
So you do have to be careful crossing the street. And this is a poem that Charles made reference to earlier, speaking of crossing the street. I crossed the street like I did when I was a kid. The other side, my hip, scolds me, as it never did when I was a kid. You can be replaced, I admonish my hip, the wrath of modern medicine on my side. Yet, at my side, my hip continues its belly aching, grumbling in undertone as I hobble by a noisy playground where kids run full court, back and forth, tirelessly, like I did when I was a kid. Slowly I limp on, and the lively sounds subside, and through the echoes in my head of games played long ago, I hear my hips piercing reply, you can be replaced. So things like that happen. The thing is, your body is guaranteed for life, but the problem is not all the parts are covered. The body that used to be yours. There comes a time to stop speaking of your body as if it is your own. You're still alive, but already your body has become the body. And the knees are creaky, the neck is stiff, the back is sagging toward the front. The skin is sagging all over. The second toe on the right foot is trespassing on its neighbor. And the old derriere is certainly not what it used to be. You may as well refer to these parts as if they belong to no one. You are accustomed to considering them your domain and had no intention of relinquishing your sovereignty. You did not liberate them, they seceded. You tried to hold the union together, but failed. The legs, the stomach, the fingers are no longer at your disposal. Even the brain has formed a mind of its own. And the heart, well, that was always the loosest part of the Confederation anyway. But you should harbor no resentment for these renegade body parts, because before the revolution, they did give you the best years of their lives. One thing you don't want your brain to revolt, but every once in a while it does. Sometimes you forget, you know, but sometimes you forget. And not just some things, everything. You know, but sometimes you forget. Sometimes you forget who you're talking to. You know there are certain things you should never say in certain company, but you say them anyway, because sometimes you forget. You know, but sometimes you forget. Sometimes you forget where you are, that you're not in Kansas, that you are on the third planet from the sun. You know, but sometimes you forget that you're not in the center of the country or at the center of the universe. You know, sometimes you forget. Sometimes you forget who you are and how you've become. You know there are certain tactics, antics, and acrobatics that you simply can't perform anymore, and probably never could. But in that momentary flash of profound forgetfulness, you make the attempt and fail, miserably, perhaps even disastrously, at something you know you should never have tried. You know, but sometimes you forget. So we do have hope for ourselves, because these are the days when we feel sometimes younger than we are.
Oh, no, no, no. We're young. Remember, 60 is the new 40.
Thank you. Because these are the days of the youth revival movement. 40 may be the new 20, and 50 the new 30. It would seem that age reduction is the trend. And if 60 is the new 40, 70 is the new 50. You can keep up the reversion to the end. It's the youth revival movement. But to join, you must survive. A lesser age is no improvement unless you are alive. So 70 is the new 50, or so we've heard it said. For each age we attain, we claim a younger age instead. We may say 80 is the new 60, and 90 is the new 70, and 100 is the new 80. But dead's the same old dead. So you can't keep it, you can't hold that off forever. And you need to keep your larder stocked, and you need a lifetime supply of stuff.
Especially during the pandemic. That, oh, my goodness,
we
you didn't want to run out of that.
Yes, we have, there's more where that came from.
But hold it up higher so they can all see. Look.
There's evidence of
Yeah, and there's more.
But you can't ever tell how much a lifetime supply is going to be, because it depends on not only how much stuff you've got, but how much time you've got left. Lifetime supply. When the fatal collision occurred, they had in their closet, unbeknownst to them, a lifetime supply of toilet paper. When the fatal collision occurred, they were on their way to market for more toilet paper. If they had realized they already had a lifetime supply, they might not have been on the road when the fatal collision occurred. If they had not been there, the fatal collision might not have occurred at all. A tragedy could have been averted, but then they might have run out of toilet paper. So you don't know till the end, and sometimes you don't even know when it's the end. This is for all of you out there who have had near-death experiences. So you've been near death and survived? Congratulations. Did you see the bright light? Feel the rush along the narrow passageway? Recognize the faces of departed loved ones as you approached? Did you notice the expressions on those faces? Maybe overhear one mutter, "Oh shit, he's coming." Get the sensation that you weren't being pulled back to life, but pushed back from death? Departed loved ones had to act fast in order to save your life, or rather to postpone your death, to buy themselves some time to find a better hiding place. But eventually it'll happen. When they find you dead. When they find you dead in bed or on your favorite chair or at the foot of the stairs, you won't care. Off in your dream, you won't hear the scream or the cry or the sigh of grief or of relief. When they find you dead or find the faded, worn rag you leave in your stead, in bed or on your favorite chair or at the foot of the stairs, you won't care. You won't be there. Well, I plan to be there, but we poets have hopes for afterward, because we hope to have posthumous fame. We hope someone will discover us after we're gone, because they're not doing a very good job of it while we're alive. So we hope for posthumous fame, but we might have to settle for something less, like posthumous irony. The poet's dead body was discovered in the living room. Let's repeat with proper emphasis. The poet's dead body was discovered in the living room. Too bad the irony had to be lost on him. The poet would have appreciated it if he were living. But so long as he were living, there could be no discovery of his dead body in the living room, and that particular irony would not be, at least not yet. The reason a poet writes is to leave something behind. And though we know that what we leave behind will in its turn leave us behind, a poet can transcend this inevitability to some small extent. That is what I am attempting here. That is why I'm leaving a copy of this poem in the living room, just in case. I'll be damned if I'm simply going to lie down and let perfectly good irony be lost on me. So in a little tenderer vein, we hope for some respect afterward too. This is called Until After. Like the speed we don't feel until after the rush, and the dreams we don't know till we waken, and the sounds we don't notice until there's a hush, and the souls we don't love till they're taken. To finish, I guess I'm getting close to finish. I'd like to. I have one little piece that refers to jazz, and since Charles is a jazz aficionado and definitely a big fan, I'm going to do this in his honor. I hope you will.
Thank you.
I hope you'll be honored anyway. It's called Jazz and All That. The trumpeter is playing his heart out in a minor key. I'm afraid he may be insulted when I blow my nose, but today I'm just loaded with sinus karma. And I think a jazz musician ought to understand that you just have to get some stuff out. Whether it's the blues, the yellows, or the greens. It's a creative thing. Still, artists can be temperamental and territorial. So I'm a little nervous when I blow my nose during the trumpeter's riff. But then I look at him over my handkerchief, and he looks at me over his horn and smiles. And a minute later, we're jamming. So I want to thank everybody for listening. Are we close enough to?
Sure. That was really that was wonderful, and I'm glad we could concentrate this time to hear you read. And thank you very much for the jazz piece. I love jazz. So what is next for Mike in terms of either publishing a book or where are you going now? Not tonight. where are you taking your work now?
Well, I can't wait for for things to get back up live, so that I did, I published this during the pandemic. I had published during the pandemic, and I actually, while it was in the process, I was thinking, oh, I hope it'll be ready by the time the pandemic is over, so I can take it to the first reading. Well, it's been over for almost a year now, and the pandemic is still not cut us loose. But I'm really looking forward to being able to do live performances again.
Sure. So with the pandemic, do you feel that you've been kind of sequestered, I'll use the word, and therefore that's given you more time, or maybe more subjects, or having been sequestered and outside the flow of everyday life, has it taken something away from your poetry?
Well, actually, no. The time is always good. I always can fill up the time with either revising or writing something new, and we're very compatible. So we haven't, we've been fine just being sequestered with just the two of us for all this time. But no, time doesn't hang heavy. I haven't found that since I retired. Before I retired, people always said, well, make sure you have something to do. You'll be bored. I'm never bored because there's always something to write.
Right, absolutely. Well, this has been good.
To read or to memorize, and he also does. He has a blog, and he has all these amazing videos that go with his poems. That are, that's another talent he didn't know he had.
Mm-hmm. Well, once again, thank you very much.
Thank you.
I'm glad that we could, have you as our guest, and especially the topic of humor is something that's near and dear to my heart. So I want to thank you, and of course I want to thank our Sergio Galliano, who has made this all possible technically and worked with us to make these programs all the time really work. The thing I want to say as I'm closing out is about Moonstone Arts. I mean, this is just one program in a wide series of things that Moonstone does. Even though there has been the pandemic, Larry has continued to have virtual readings, and actually with the virtual, he's expanded internationally to the different poets from different countries. He's had French poets, he's had poets from Russia and Ukraine, and so that might become a new feature. The thing I want to really say is Larry does all this. We do like 80 poetry events a year. We publish close to 35 books each year, most of them being chat books. And we need support to be able to do that. So I'm appealing to the people who are our viewers that to go onto our website, which is Larry at moonstoneartcenter.org, and see how and where you can make a contribution to continue to help and to keep us alive and going, so that we can do more things. Not only like this Philly Cam piece and Philly Loves Poetry, but the other poetry events. So once again, I thank you, and I'm very grateful, and I'll see you in the other side of the world.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you so much.